think everyone's here, right? Looks like
Yep.
it. All right. Let's kick it off with, I don't have any updates, so let's get me. I'll go in order on my screen. I'll start with Lars, if Lars has anything this week.
Only thing is there's a new PR for summarizing the weeklies. I know Luke has gotten to it already, so there's at least something from Paul's stuff, and there's definitely Hans in there. So if you can summarize a little bit, I'll try to get that out quickly. You should have been tagged, so you should have it in your GitHub notifications. Otherwise, it's the PR in getlumen.org repo.
All right, Luke.
I don't have access to the new client yet, so I'm still working on Lumen so far this week. And since the last send up, it's mostly been just porting more tests. And I think since the last meeting was when the EIR updates. So the EIR update changed how some of the binaries are passed down. And so that changed how some of the built-ins for the binaries had to be used, and it touched a little bit of codegen, so there might be a conflict with your stuff, Paul. But Hans, I think you still, right now it's like doing byte-wise binaries, and Hans is going to work on an EIR change to go back to actually having them be UTF-8 tagged and be true constants again.
I've been working on getting out the changes to allow like named functions, like self-referential named functions.
Okay.
Plus fixing escaping. So that's I'm hoping to push that out like today or tomorrow, and then I'll fix the binaries, how they're actually lowered to constants, hopefully.
Yeah, so something to be aware of, Paul. If you update your branch to the latest stuff undeveloped, the EIR change made binaries be byte-wise right now temporarily because of a fix for UTF-8 handling. And so Hans needs it. So if you're like, oh, it changed and there's a conflict, if you change the binary stuff, that's why.
Instead of pushing a binary constant, it just pushes the individual bytes or integers.
Sure, yeah, okay. Is there like an optimization for like binaries that are just constructed from a constant?
No, it was a problem with like the /UTF-8 wasn't respected at all. So like we couldn't encode, our normal test case of Jose with the E with the accent. It didn't encode correctly. It encoded as like high ASCII instead of actual UTF-8.
So I had to redo a lot of the binary stuff in the front end to fix like how it's handled with the specifiers on strings and stuff. So it's a result of that, but like I messed something up somewhere, so this shouldn't really happen in that case. Like if you specify like a 9-bit size specifier on your binary or something, then not on your binary, but on your string in binary construct in the syntax, then it's going to still push, at least temporarily. But that should be like, I don't think that's ever used anywhere. I haven't seen it used, but it's just a semantic that we need to support. But yeah, it should go back to normal, like for the regular cases at least.
I can see, well, not on strings per se, but like weird what you would think like nibble line stuff can happen because like some DSPs can be 36-bit. So like it is potentially like actually used somewhere in industry. It's not just a weird thing of like extending the syntax.
So
or, like
what I mean is that if you have a binary construct and you do like a string with quotes inside, and then you put a specifier on that and then a sizing on that while it's integer.
Yeah, I could only see that if it was a magic constant on a weird architecture. So, like, I agree with you. Like, we have to support it just because technically it's supported.
Basically, what it does is it takes like the code point and it just like formats it as an integer that size and just put it in the binary. But like, I haven't ever seen it used, but I guess like, yeah, as you said, there's probably edge cases where someone has used it sometime.
It's got to be a compilation error to use a string constant with a bit size that's larger than the constant.
No.
Or I mean, smaller than.
No, that it
no, smaller auto truncates. Like that is totally a thing that Erlang supports. Is if you if you make the size plus unit too small, it just truncates the literal.
It silently
Concept.
truncates.
Yeah.
It's the code point. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
No, I
interesting,
know
but
that because
that's-
it was a weirdness thing with testing Elixir syntax and yeah, so it's like a way to hack apart something that's too large.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about binary construction, though, not matching.
Yeah, because you can put that
Yes.
literal in IEX and it only gives you part of it. It's totally supported.
So like when if you do
broke as fuck.
UTF-8 or UTF-16 or UTF-32, then it's going to format it as that like binary representation. But if you do integer, then what it does in reality is it's just the code point, and the behavior of that in Erlang is that it just like truncates it, it just wraps around. So that's why when you if you do like UTF-8 text in a string literal like that in a binary, then and give it like an integer specifier, then it's gonna like wrap
If
around.
you put
do
a
one byte.
string hello world / UTF-8, it does not compile error on that. It just truncates it.
With UTF-8, then it's gonna format it as UTF-8 like text.
What / UTF-8 is a character literal, a code point, not a string.
Yes.
Right. We're saying for the other, like when you're not saying UTF-8 or UTF-16, not the UTF ones, the one where you specify like the size of the units, that's allowed and it'll truncate. It's weird, but it's like technically allowed by the syntax.
Oh man, that's
because we're like, oh, that's weird. We tried in Erl or IX, and then we know how it behaves. So unfortunately, we have to match that, even if we don't agree with it.
So what's the extension behavior then? If it automatically truncates, what happens when you specify a size that's like double?
It's just like 0 pad. It's like a regular number. Like if
well, that's what I would expect, but I mean, with that weird ass truncation behavior, who knows? That's weird.
Like it's the same. I think it's the same behavior if you put like UTF-8 or like Unicode text in a string literal. Oh no, then it doesn't truncate because then it's just a character list with the code points. Never mind. But yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know. I mean, in practice, like the behavior is that the binary with like a string inside, like the syntax, it's just sugar for. It takes every code point in that like string char list, and it puts the specifier in each one. So that's like how the syntax works. Like, yeah.
It looks so. Like I tried just size 8 with the string high, and Elixir IX will complain that's a compile error, but I don't think Erlang does.
Yeah, I mean, there's no sane way to interpret feeding a string and then a size that's smaller than that string in bits or bytes.
Right, but the problem is, like, if it works in Erl, we have to assume that the OTP team is probably going to yell at us.
I'm not really talking about whether or not it's technically supported, but rather that there is no sensible way to interpret what that's even supposed to mean. So probably the behavior that exists is them just being like, whatever is convenient to do in the compiler, basically.
It's implementation defined, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be like the concatenate operator, where concatenating where the left is an empty string just gets you the right, and it's not stringish, because like that just flows from generalizing the behavior of concatenate.
Interesting. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean that all makes sense. Annoying edge cases.
I posted one in the channel for like an illustration.
Funsies. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, in this case, then it's gonna just like it's gonna lower that to like a sequences of pushing like 2-bit integers to binaries. But for all like the regular sane use cases, then it's gonna end up like creating an actual binary constant. So. I mean, and like writing a optimization pass to deal with that isn't a big deal either. So, I mean, I don't know if I really want to like do like bit string manipulation in the front end.
Yeah, I mean that's a code gen optimization based on how a particular backend decides they want to handle binary construction, pattern matching, and stuff. But in our case, we could easily constant fold those things.
I mean, I would say the one we want is we want, if the literal code says UTF-8 or UTF-16, we want that pass through because like the compiler already has stuff to know about those specifiers. Plus, it means that stuff doesn't have to go through parsing and reproving its UTF-8 or UTF-16. And we also can construct a literal binary with the UTF-8 flag already set then, without having to check it.
I construct, like for all the same cases, I just make a literal binary. That's like the behavior I want.
Okay.
Because then, if not, then I'm gonna like end up. I don't know if it's a big deal, but that like generates in some cases if you have like a reasonably long string, then it's gonna like generate a lot of IR, and I'd rather not if I.
Oh
like
yeah,
because
really you're gonna have a push for every byte. That's horrible for like actual text.
Yeah, I would rather just, it's like a simple case to deal with in the front end, so I'm just going to deal with like all the same cases, just, and lower it as a binary.
Yeah, that's fine. I guess I would, just because I don't know if the errors will be better, if it's possible to preserve even the weird encoding from the literal version as long as possible, but maybe it won't matter for the errors. You know, because if you...
I don't see what kind of errors we could do better. Like, what's the cases where we think we could like improve the errors by passing down information?
Yeah, I don't know if it's worth issuing a warning for the weird cases.
I mean, if you're thinking about like preserving info that this binary is like valid UTF-8.
I don't think there's any sense in generating warnings for those things if Erlang or Elixir are not currently doing so today, primarily because, and with the exception of if they're not doing those warnings because they lack the information to do them. But assuming that they're not warning on things like that deliberately, which is probably the case because you can't really predict what kind of weird stuff people want to do with the binary construction and matching. There's not a whole lot that we can warn about in a way that's always going to point out some kind of issue. I mean, the only one that I would raise an error about is that weird truncation behavior, because to me that just seems like you've got some kind of bug if you're doing that or relying on that anyways.
Yeah,
definitely the like character, the byte-wise truncation is a weird one to me.
I mean, I think like it comes from how, and yeah, what's really fucky is that this is like the default behavior too, right? Because the default specifier, if I don't like, that's like an integer, like a byte-sized integer, like a character. So then when you do like UTF string and omit the /UTF-8 specifier, then it's just gonna truncate your characters.
I know it always messes with me that the unit specifier is not like the unit size, but like how many units. But it's not called units; it's just called unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like unit in terms of like, SI units, like millimeters, centimeters, whatever, you know what I mean? That's the sense that word applies. So it's just a number because there's no, I mean, I guess they could do like nibble bit byte.
No, I just meant that like, they say size is how many like bits wide it is, and the unit is you multiply the number of size it is. So that means that unit, when you do like unit 1, it is 1 unit of that size. But when you do it 2, you're not saying that the unit is 2 bits wide. You're saying that there are 2 units of size like 16.
Right.
And so I guess I would have called it units with an S to make it clear that your like size is the thing that's controlling the number of bits, and unit is how many of those size. So it'd be units, not unit. But
yeah, I mean, it's always been a little bit confusing. For whatever reason, my brain grokked it the right way the first time, but I think that was an accident, to be honest. Because when I've gone back and read the documentation when we were starting work on Lumen, I was very confused by how they described it. I mean, it makes sense when you read it a couple times over, But I remember thinking to myself, like, how did I even understand this the first time I read this? But I got lucky, I guess. Some good code examples or something.
I mean, as soon as we hit the like TCP libraries, we should have good test cases for binary pattern matching to see that we didn't screw it up.
Yeah, I mean, we can also do quite a bit of useful property-based tests with that kind of thing, because generative testing with binaries is way easier than pretty much anything else. We can generate all kinds of weird stuff with binaries, because it essentially doesn't matter what the case is. And even the times where you actually care what the content of a binary is, those are also easy to generate. Like generating valid UTF-8 or generating valid ASCII or generating something in some other car set or whatever.
Are we actually using match context now?
Kind of.
Okay.
Not really.
Okay, because like that's
I'd have to go double check how I did the implementation of the match primitives, but I can't remember if I just tossed the match context stuff because I didn't need it, or if I am actually using it.
okay. I mean,
I might be using it.
If we end up not using it, it'd be good to know, because like it was even untested for the full runtime because I didn't generate them. And
I think we're just using sub-binaries.
Okay.
And if we're using, yeah, I'm pretty sure we're not using match context at all. Just off the top of my head, I can't see anything that it would have been useful for. It's like this weird intermediate data structure that just for how we're compiling things just doesn't come in handy. It's not, there's no benefit in having it. But in an interpreter, it's a little bit different because you don't exactly know what's going to happen when. But we can reason about the program considerably more statically than I think the Beam bothers to do. And then they also had some weird blending going on with the match context stuff. Like it could also be used for writable binaries.
Yeah, I remember that flag.
In some weird cases. And I can't remember if that was an optimization or a legacy thing that was left over that they just don't use anymore. But in any case, none of what was in there was of particular importance. But I'd have to go back and double check to make sure that I didn't actually end up using it. But I'm pretty sure all we're using is sub-binaries, because in practice, that's all we care about. When we call into one of the matchers, we already know that we're trying to match either a value like an integer or some subslice of bits or bytes. And sub-binary covers the latter two. And then everything else, we're just pulling a value out of the binary, so we don't need a match context or sub-binary for those. But yeah, my brain's not working super well. I was up all night.
I mean, we can go to your status next, I guess.
Yeah, I have not been able to do a whole lot in the past week. It's been super busy at work the last 7 days or so. I did get past the one sort of final hump that I had in my way, which is the types of closures. Now that that's addressed, I think all the type system changes are done. I just need to go through and test everything with the set of tests that I've been running and make sure that all the bugs that I thought were fixed are still fixed. And then I can get that pushed. That was kind of the main goal to have done by today, but it's not quite there yet. And then once I get that push, there's a couple other tasks I have on my to-do list. I'm just gonna pick off whichever one is highest priority. Not much else to report other than that at the moment. I need to put together the notes and stuff for the WebAssembly stack subgroup meeting coming up in a week and a half-ish, our presentation for that. So that's the only other interesting item of note coming up soon. Next week I'll be on vacation, so I may or may not make stand-up. Kind of just depends on whether I'm sitting around on Wednesday or not. Assuming I'm not out and about with EV doing something, then I'll probably log on just to report in.
Yeah. Once your stuff gets merged, I'll, assuming I'm not busy with client stuff, I'll go through the OTP builds and figure out if we've have any new classes of bugs or not.
Oh, that's actually the one thing that I am probably going to do quick before I move on to a larger task is make some of the changes to the front end of Lumen so that it understands and processes .app files. That should make it a lot more useful for pointing it at not only OTP, but any third-party libraries as well. The goal there would be to just pull in enough metadata so that we, can reason about what we're expected to do with that translation unit. Which modules exist, what dependencies we need to find, that kind of thing. We'll probably have to do some thinking about how we want to handle, dealing with dependencies in general. We'll need to integrate with tools like Mix or Rebar, to handle the actual dependency resolution and fetching and stuff in cases where those haven't already happened. So my thinking is that in addition to a Mix plugin, we'll probably also need a Rebar 3 plugin for Erlang projects. And basically use those to feed us like a metadata file that we can work on. The goal would be to have something similar to the Rust crate graph to operate on. But ultimately, rather than lowering every module to its own object file, I want to take an entire application and combine all of those into one translation unit, one object file.
One thing we might want to do is to have slightly different semantics around like allowing usage of a library if it's not like dependent on by project. So like if you have an umbrella application with several applications, if you don't depend on one from another, like if you have your web application and then you try to use the library you only have as a dependency from your like backend application, should we do things differently there, or should we do it the exact same way?
I mean, Jose said that the Elixir team wants to start warning about those boundary violations, so maybe it's not our problem, but I'm not sure.
I thought that was a change that was coming in like the next release, in particular the umbrella project thing, where you accidentally reference a dependency that's not technically direct. It's just happens to be loaded.
So are they warning about it, or are they actually doing like errors? I guess they're not doing errors because that would be breaking.
My understanding is that they were planning or are checking whether or not the dependency is available but not directly referenced, meaning like they loaded it because it's part of the Mix project, but it was not actually referenced in the source project's Mix file, because that's a pretty easy thing for them to recognize. I mean, relatively speaking. I don't know that it gets much more tough
Rust doing that. That Rust doesn't let you do that, where you can accidentally like reference a dependency of your dependencies. You have to declare it.
Honestly, it won't even be a problem with Elixir if it wasn't for how blended compile time and runtime are. The problem is that when Elixir loads a project, a Mix project, it's just loaded. And anytime something references that, it thinks that it's loaded because it's supposed to be loaded. And so you can just do whatever you want with that code, even though it's not going to be there when you like compile a release and then run it in a different environment. But nothing tells you that that is why things work in dev but not in prod. You just find out the hard way. We could probably recognize that easier than Elixir because we, don't have that problem. But since we would be relying on Elixir to tell us what things need to be compiled, we might be prone to the same issue in that we have to sort of trust what Elixir tells us needs to be compiled. So we can't be just very smart about it. We essentially have to rely on whatever metadata we can get from Elixir.
Is there any way when we're linking that we can make so we kind of, we don't check that something is an actual Erlang function until very late, just so that we can link to like Lumen OTP and just assume it's there. But that means like if you forget to import or you link and it's not there, it'll say like init div2 is not defined, and it'll just be like, well, that's weird. I don't expect init div2 to be a thing. Is there any way to run the system linkers in a way where we can say the error for them and like do a did you mean thing of like, oh, we know this is actually in this thing, you just forgot to import it?
I mean, the best thing we can do is try and parse the system linker output. That's about it.
Yeah, that's probably not guaranteed to be stable though. So
it's not at all. But we could probably handle it for like major platforms, ones that are relatively stable. And if we, don't recognize the pattern of the error or whatever, then we just bail out and show the raw thing. That way we don't accidentally hide something. But we could potentially, the information that we would be looking for that particular case is fairly predictable. So it wouldn't be too difficult, I don't think, to recognize that. The question is just how much variance there is in that output system to system.
We could maybe check how the IDEs and editors for C parse that output, and maybe there is a machine readable format that's more stable that we don't know about, like some flag options.
Well, I mean, most of the IDEs don't link for editing stuff. Like they don't do that at all, because for most large C or C++, well, C++ projects anyways, compilation can take on the order of 20 minutes to an hour or more. So it's just
right. But I'm thinking of the output from like the build commands and like obviously how Visual Studio does it will be how they would be different because they're more integrated with the Windows compilers. But I guess we'd have to see if like Eclipse does it or if C-Line does it for the JetBrains IDEs, and see if they have parsers for the link output.
Yeah, I mean, Visual Studio probably does, simply because they're relying on the fact that you're using the Microsoft C compiler. But any cross-platform or IDEs that can be used with different compilers, I don't know that they would bother. In particular, I don't recall Eclipse doing anything like that, but we could definitely check.
The other option, of course, is we just include documentation that, like, if you see this link error, it's you forgot to do an import, which really only applies to Erlang, because Elixir, it'll just work, or it means it's not listed as an app, I guess, would be the Elixir problem.
Yeah, I mean, we can pretty predictably parse those linker errors where, a symbol is undefined across GCC and C-Line without too much effort. Can we handle arbitrary linker errors? No, and I don't think we need to try and do that anyways. The case with undefined functions is the main one. Yeah. So I don't know. Definitely something we can take a look at, but probably one way that we can cope with that a little bit is store the symbols that are referenced during compilation that are externals. So within the context of a single application, grab all the symbols that were generated for that application. And then if there are any symbols that do not fall within that set of modules, you know, if there's nothing else to be compiled, then we know there's missing symbols. We don't even have to try and invoke the linker. And in the case where we have more to compile, then we just defer that check until that next application has been compiled. I don't know that it's necessarily foolproof, but probably would be good enough as a sanity check. I suspect that would cover the undefined symbol error for the most part.
Yeah. Low priority, just like a nice to have. So obviously fixing any active compilation errors with OTP is a higher priority.
Yeah, no, I think that's not something we should even bother thinking about until the compiler is pretty stable. And we're focused more on just developer experience kind of improvements. But some of those things are worth keeping in mind as we're making other changes, just in case, you know, we're in making similar changes, we can do multiple things like that at the same time.
Hans, did you cover everything with that you were doing already with the name functions and then binaries?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's about it.
Brian Joseph, do you have any status updates?
Oh, sorry, my mic was turned down. Nothing from me.
Okay.
Sounds good. Is there anything conference-wise or news-wise otherwise that we need to care about? Or
No, I reached out to a few of the conferences. I've heard back. The common theme right now is wait and see. Some of them are considering not doing anything. They want to see what if Jim will be doing so, but how Jim makes out on the I don't know what you're calling it, like the paid video tier that they're doing from ElixirConf.
right.
See if it was profitable or not, or if it like allowed them to break even. And without a way forward for these conferences to do it remotely, but also in a way that they're financially incentivized to do so, I don't see these conferences happening in the next year, across multiple languages, not just Elixir. But I think it's, again, just wait and see right now.
All right. Well, yeah, that's about what I figured, I guess. And plenty of time before the next one that we would have been really thinking about anyways. So I guess Lone Stars. So
I mean, the funny thing is that with these remote conferences, we just do our own. I mean, it's not like we're gonna need to do like LumenConf. We could literally just say like, hey, on December 3rd, we're gonna do a 1 hour like streaming presentation on the state of Lumen.
Exactly.
And just put it out there. There's no
rules, man.
Yeah, there's no rules.
That might
Everything's out the
actually
window.
like give a lot more viewership than having it like as a part of a larger conference if we make it an event on our own.
Yeah.
I mean, we could just. I mean, Docker doesn't have a Twitch channel right now. We could just have a Twitch channel.
We can also stream on the YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We can do YouTube also.
Yeah, we have
You
the
can even
YouTube
do.
channel.
Oh, that's true, because
You
YouTube does have chat. I forget that because I have an extension on to block it. And
You
the
can even
comments.
do a pre-recorded thing too.
Yeah.
I mean, if we were to do that, so we'd have full control of the schedule. We'd have to definitively commit to a date that was reasonable, where something of value, not just like a status update, but something that people watching could take away from it, as far as feature set of Lumen would go, and not one that we're kind of backing ourselves into a corner where you guys are now stressed out to try to reach. Although that's I don't think it matters. Like, as any conference date, it's always going to be,
Yeah,
a race to the end. But if we wanted to do that, we can discuss it next week, decide on a reasonable date, and then I can work on just kind of getting the word out at that point, and it can literally just be an hour. It would just be, here's I don't know, or if we wanted to break it up into several different things, if each of you wanted your own 30-minute separate, I don't know. I mean,
we could put our feelers out and just see what people are interested in hearing about and go from there.
If we're doing on YouTube, we could also, and we did pre-record, we could use the Premiere system where, like, the first, when you first upload it, it uploads it live and you're on chat with people. And then after that, it just becomes a normal video again.
But the Premiere also allows you to get it into people's feeds like days or even weeks in advance, right? So that they're
because
notified
it
of
shows up as a schedulable live event, which is unlike how like I don't do our talks as a scheduled live event. I just turn it on when we do it. Mostly because I take the time to figure it out. But yeah, it'd be schedulable, and then people could subscribe ahead of time to it.
Yeah, I liked the way the ElixirConf went, in the sense that you would have those talks that you could stream and watch, read only basically, and then in between the talks you could join a Zoom channel or a Google Meet and be able to chat with people remotely. And so maybe something like that could be done, just like a 2-hour block, and then you build in like 20 minutes or a break in between where people can jump in and kind of chat amongst themselves, or interact. There may be something there. I don't know. I don't want to overthink it either and have it like really go towards like a full-blown conference.
One thing
I don't think it needs to be that complex.
One thing we have to remember also is that if we do this, and it's never really been done before, at least in the Elixir community, then people might perceive it then bigger of a deal, like bigger of a deal than we do ourselves. So people might get disappointed if they tune into our block of talks and not end up getting anything exciting.
Of all the video game ones, Nintendo Direct is the best, so we need to do Lumen Direct.
That's fine. We could get a stage and announce.
No, that's why they're so good. They don't do stage stuff anymore. They're like, here's a little intro of a talking head, and here's the game, and none of that people trying to be camaraderie on a stage or play a video game on a stage. Like all the other vendors, like Microsoft and Xbox, are like, we're cool gamers in our business suits on this stage, and here's a celebrity. While Nintendo Direct is like, here is game. You like game? Good.
Yeah. So the only, if I'm thinking about the potential risks here of doing that, I know that Jose has been vocal that he doesn't want to have what happened in the Ruby community, where you have RubyConf and RailsConf, and you have these separate kind of segmented conferences. He wants everything under the Elixir umbrella, which I understand and appreciate. So I think that the takeaway from this has to be that this would not be a conference. It could be akin to a meetup, like a virtual meetup. In that way, when things hopefully someday go back to normal, then we pull back on this and just reintegrate back into the regular conferencing.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's not nearly big enough deal to do a conference kind of thing. Right. It's more like a one-time, hey, come check this out if you're interested kind of a deal. And obviously down the road, if we build up a bit of a community, especially around the front end framework side of things, all that jazz, then it becomes a little bit of a different deal. There's enough topics out there where you can do sort of a mini conference kind of thing, but we're a long ways.
Jim and I have talked about that. I mean, this is, I think last year, ElixirConf, where we were chatting that maybe someday down the road, and this is getting ahead of ourselves also to a degree, that if it's successful and it does start to buy in, that there could be a track at ElixirConf for it, especially if there's like a lot of front end stuff that is so separate away from some of the Elixir traditional back end stuff. But anyway, okay.
I believe there's an ElixirConf EU coming up though, right now.
There's
they're already locked for speakers though. So
Yeah.
Virtual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
when's that
They're
happening?
using Jim's platform for that.
the originally scheduled time when it wasn't virtual.
October 7th through 8th.
Yeah,
Is
sounds
what I'm
about
seeing on the
right.
website.
I should probably get a ticket.
Wasn't there one this spring?
Yeah, it was weird. We thought they were replacing this one with the virtual one, but then they held that one, and they're still holding the original time slot as a virtual also.
Yeah, I had the like double confused with both ElixirConf EU and CodeBeam, because
Yeah.
CodeBeam did CodeBeam V, and then they did CodeBeam Stockholm as CodeBeam V.
I wish they could like start
weird.
numbering them or something to.
Yeah, just start doing rolling releases. It's
Well, they are. They're all numbered 5. That's why there's the V.
Erlang Factory was so easy. It was, you had your initialism for where it was and the year. Boom. No ambiguity whatsoever. I don't know why they went away from that with Coping.
What would they do this year when they randomly decided to do 2 of them?
Well, the virtual ones definitely jack it up a little bit, you know. But I guess that's when you start using seasons, right? Fall, winter.
But that'd be very like hemisphere specific.
Yeah, that's true.
Conferences should just do semantic versioning, so whenever they break the format of they just add a major release.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's marinate on this, and then maybe next week we can discuss if we are going to move forward with it, what quarter we would like to do this in.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think I would consider like a winterish thing, you know, like end of this year, beginning of next. Just use that as like your basis for thinking about it. I think anything
as far as
further
communication
out than that
goes, I think that we would need at least 2 months of time in order to generate interest and participation appropriately. So we'd really be looking at anything at least 2 months out. So right now it's either earliest this mid to late December, Q1.
Probably early
Anyway,
January then, yeah.
Yeah, we can discuss this next week.
Sounds good.
All right.
You don't want to do Ruby Christmas releases?
Well, did they skip this year? I thought Matt skipped the Christmas release this year.
I don't know.
Or last year.
I mean, this year's supposed to be Ruby 3.
Yeah, I thought that's what happened last year. Maybe it was just like a bump just to keep on the Christmas releases. But I thought that there was that they couldn't get in what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I thought I read something about to that effect as well, but I don't pay super close attention to what's going on in Ruby these days. So.
Yeah. Well, if you want to take a look at the latest Ruby 3 feature set, it's basically whatever is trendy out there in language land that they're trying to shove into Ruby.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. Like the whole type system seems a bit odd that they're trying to get in there. There's a few other things that I was just going through. I was like, okay. It's almost some of the example code. It looked unrecognizable from what I wrote years ago.
Yeah, that's what happens when you start shoving everything in the kitchen sink in a language. It starts to evolve.
Yeah, I mean they're chasing market share essentially,
trying to find that secret sauce.
Yeah.
I mean, those shifts can.
Last time I revisited PHP, it looked like enterprise.net.
I mean, those shifts can happen. Like
weird.
C++ before and after Boost became STL, you know, like before they integrated everyone using STL, and like RAII wasn't a thing in original C++. It was much more like C with objects. Like languages can change that much and still be used in industry.
Oh, it'll definitely be used. It's just that I don't know. Maybe I'm just that out of touch with Ruby at this point, where I'm not really seeing the community they're coalescing around all this stuff. And it also seemed like Ruby's been around this long without this stuff. Does it? I don't know. Anyway, I shouldn't comment on it because I'm so far removed from Ruby at this point.
Well, and also remember, pure Ruby examples will always look different than Rails. Like Rails dominates the American ecosystem so much that like European and Japanese Ruby looks completely different.
Yeah, that's. I only have so much mental bandwidth, and for me, it's Rust, C++, and Elixir, and Erlang, and that's it. Anything more than that, I don't have brain space for that. So just shove it out.
All right, everyone. Thanks.
Talk to you later.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.